Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Homefront Harmony. I am your host, Stevie Dahl. We are the podcast that specializes in providing military families with the mental health, financial, and well-being resources that they need. Now, we have had some badass guests on our show before, and we have another one here today. If you thought Brian Jensen was amazing, meet the man who helped mold him into what he is today at West Point. Our special guest for today has not only written a book about leadership. Not only does property management with his Olympic championship wife figure skater thing, but he also served our country. Please join me in welcoming JB. Hello, sir. Thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you, Stevie. Thanks for having me. I think you have a great podcast. I was just telling Offset there that I think the military does a wonderful job of putting people into the Army. I think the military does a terrible job when people leave the Army. So I think what you're trying to do here is a credit to soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, Coast Guardsmen that are deciding to serve their country and then eventually leave their country and get into public life.
Well, thank you very much. I hope so. That is the goal of this, living on the legacy, trying to get people what people need. So it's a wonderful thing to have. Now, I love how we were talking about in the last episode, how small Vegas is, how the military community gets tight. No matter where you go, you find out somebody knows my dad served. Doesn't matter that he was Navy. Doesn't matter that I didn't serve. All of a sudden, I have instant family. And coming here and finding all the connections I've had with the different guests we've been able to have on here is great. You give us such a different aspect. So you were at West Point at one time, and you were a drill sergeant?
I was an instructor at West Point. Yeah, okay. I was a drill instructor too. It's two different assignments, but thing. And I know you talked about Colonel Brian Jensen there. Let me tell you, he was easy to deal with. All I had to do was chip off the rough edges. He already had it in him. Some people just come ready to go. So he was one of my favorites there, actually. So yes, I did work at the military academy for almost a decade and in several positions there, to include a TAC NCO, the senior enlisted advisor to Department of Military Instruction, first sergeant of the prep school, and then also in the athletic department too. So, I saw a lot of facets about West Point, and I will tell you, it is a wonderful institution. It's a wonderful place for young men and women to learn and grow. And I always tell these young people that that get an appointment to one of the service academies, if they don't go, they're stupid. because they should go if they're lucky enough to get an appointment to one of the academies. So I will just tell all the taxpayers out there then that the academies do a good job. I'm happy in the also in the change of senior leadership in our especially in our Department of Defense. I think that's going to help the academies. I think sometimes the academies need to be apolitical, right? I think they're best that way. And if you look at even Dwight D. Eisenhower, famous general and obviously President of the United States, he didn't actually vote while he was a military officer. The first time he voted is when he was running for president. So I think that needs to be the aspect of our senior military officials, because then that aspect then resonates down to the junior leadership and the soldiers. Absolutely.
We don't do politics or anything on the show. I will tell you, I believe if you're going to be the commander in chief, you should have at least served at some point in the military. That's my heart and soul. It's not the law, but it's one thing I think is beneficial when you have that kind of control to understand. Because my dad had a saying, for those who have fought for it, freedom has a taste the protected will never know. And it's so very, very true. And when I talk about a lot that when I was a kid, I knew my dad was leaving the house and might not come home. Now, I didn't think he was going to die, but I knew that was a possibility. At 8, that's kind of weird that you would know that, but that was just what life was. And I think the different perspectives are what help us evolve and grow and get better at what we do in every day. And you're right. There's more stuff now than there was when my dad transitioned out of service, but there's still so much more we could be doing. So it's a constant growth and something that we can evolve with, hopefully continue evolve with. Hopefully. So I love that. So tell me, what made you go in to the Army?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was a young kid from just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I had a great family. Mom and dad worked hard, helped put my sisters through college. My sisters are both older and very successful in their life and their careers and their families. And I wanted to pay for my own college, and I said, I'm going to find a way to pay for my own college. Well, the military gave you that aspect. So, I tell the story a lot, but, I went to the Army recruiter, and I was like, hey, I want the college fund. He's like, no problem. He's like, 4 years in the Army, I'll pay for 4 years of college. I'm like, great. He goes, what job do you want to do? I'm like, what? Like, I didn't even think that was a thing. I just thought you just signed up and they told you what to do. And he went through my fitness file, went through my school records. So I was a decent athlete, a decent student. He's like, and he had a pull-up bar across his door in his office. And he was like, do some pull-ups. And I did some pull-ups. And he's like, do some push-ups. I did some push-ups. He's like, why don't you become an Army Ranger? I'm like, great. What do they do? I was like, great. But now you got to understand, this is like before the internet. Like no one knew anything about that. I'm like, great. What do they do?
Yeah.
And he said, jump out of airplanes, blow stuff up. And I said, sign me up.
Done.
I had no idea what I was getting into.
I mean,
now today's, there's a friend of mine, Dr. Sweet, he runs this special operations pre-training course. If you're a high school kid and you want to learn how to excel and, get to the SEALs or the Rangers or be a Green Beret or a pararescueman. Like he puts you through a course now that you can train and do that. I had no idea what I was getting into.
Yeah.
From basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia. Back then it was called School for Boys. Right? It was all men in basic training back then in the infantry. And then going to airborne school and getting through that. And then when I went through, now it's called Ranger Assessment Selection Process, RASP. But when I went through, it was called RIP, Ranger Indoctrination Program. And, 130 of us showed up and the senior instructor walked out and he said, I don't care if any of you make it. And I believed him.
Yeah.
And it began, you talk about like hell week for like 4 weeks. Right. And somehow I made it through there and ended up in 2nd Ranger Battalion with a wonderful squad leader, Hugh Roberts, who actually lives here in Vegas, by the way.
Small community.
Small community. He's a professional photographer now, but he's actually in the Ranger Hall of Fame. He served 30 years in the military and was the Ranger Regimental Sergeant Major. So the highest enlisted position in the Ranger Regiment. So he's here, and I fortunately somehow made it.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So
there's my career. So it started there.
JB, you're getting some gold stars right out the gate. So first of all, you get a gold star because you said what the acronyms were for. Thank you. Because sometimes we get people watching us and they don't know every acronym we're spouting. Right. And we talk. So that was very good. 2, I appreciate your candid honesty about the path that you took, the way that you went. Like when my father went, he had a college scholarship on gymnastics.
Sure.
And he was like halfway through his freshman year, it was like, I want to go serve my country. He went down and he signed up for the Navy, and then he did 2 tours in Vietnam and then ended up serving 21 years. But it was what he wanted to do. It just, if it doesn't hit everybody like that, you don't get that, I'm going to do this kind of thing. Yeah. So I love that you got to go on that, we'll call it roller coaster adventure ride of prepping to it. So how long were you a Ranger? So
I was in the Army for 26 years.
Okay.
I spent 10 years in the Ranger Regiment.
Okay.
I was Ranger qualified at 19 years old.
Wow.
Went there. But, I was in the Army about 2 years, and then, they made me a sergeant. And then I was like, okay, maybe I can do this. So you never go in thinking you're going to stay in this long, and you just, but it worked out that I had very good assignments. And in between being a Ranger, I was a drill instructor. And then after the Rangers again, I went to go work at West Point and taught at OCS. And, I just found, great people along the way. And I think that's and that's what people miss when they leave the military. They leave the military because you're such a part of a team. When they throw this you know, these diversity questions and everything in. I just like want to laugh because like, and maybe it's out there, but like, I don't think we ever looked at like color. Like everybody wore camouflage. No. Oh, yeah. So we're like, okay, like just do your job. And everybody, that's how it was respected.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter. I mean, you military gives people from all backgrounds, rich, poor, black, white, green, blue. It doesn't matter. It gives you the opportunity to just go and perform.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when you try to throw division in there for a reason, I was just like, what? Like I just never looked at that. Male, female, it doesn't matter. Like come and do your job.
Yeah.
Right? Can you PT? Physical training. That's what it stands for.
Another gold star.
Yeah. You know, can you shoot your weapon? Do you show up on time early? Have all your gear that you're supposed to have? Like, and you're competent at what you need to do. I remember even in Afghanistan, like we had one female at our camp. She was an E6. She's now a warrant officer, Jasmine Bermudez Jackson. And I remember she was there and she's like, hey, I want to go on a combat patrol. I'm like, no problem. I'm like, go see Sergeant Ader and get qualified. And she had to go through, you know, the same skills to qualify to go on a combat patrol.
Right.
Like, can you operate a 50 cal machine gun?
Right.
You know, can you reduce stoppage and clear it? Can you, do you know how to use night vision? Do you know how to use a radio? And she crushed it.
Yeah.
And went on the combat patrol. Like, let's go.
Yeah.
And, because it says U.S. Army on your name tag. And so that's how at least I was taught to treat people, and that's how I treated people. I mean, was always nice to everybody? Probably not. It's probably people are going to be like, hey, you yelled at me.
Drill sergeant. He wasn't nice.
You yelled at me a lot. I yelled at everybody. Yeah. And especially when, I became a sergeant major. All sergeant majors do is yell at people because somebody's always doing something wrong.
So I'm a sergeant major. Okay. Good to know.
Yeah.
All right.
So, that's part of that's part of the training, but it's part of the it's almost like yelling at people with respect, actually.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, and it's always giving people the benefit of the doubt, and always understand that young men and women, like soldiers, they make mistakes. Like, is it something to ruin their career on? I don't know. Or can they just, you complaining? Go on a 5-mile run.
Yep.
The kid comes back, you still complaining? No, Sergeant Major, good. You learned. That's it. You'd be surprised what a 5-mile run does for people.
Oh, I'm sure. I don't want to run a 5 mile.
So I just think that. So, but what, you're trying to do at the end, and I think the military is now starting to try to transition people out. But it's almost like, we're professional athletes. We really are. We're professional athletes. We just use a, M4 carbine. The tool of trade is different. Instead of a football or a hockey stick or whatever else, your tool of trade is a weapon system. And the military does a great job of training you, going through leadership courses, helping you get promoted, making you smarter. But when they're done with you, they're done with you.
Yeah.
And that's it. And just like professional athletes, I worked in professional sports too. And I saw it with, our young players, like when they're done with it, move on. And this kid has to figure it out. And so I think, when you try to help people transition, because, it would have been easy for me to retire as a sergeant major and go to government contracting.
Yes.
Pick up a gun, wear body armor again, and go be a gun buddy somewhere. And I said to myself, I hung up my guns, Stevie, and I said, I'm not going back to that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. I hung up my guns and I said, I made a mark, even when I was like, wow, I got a mortgage payment to make.
Yeah.
Like, how am I going to do all this? And yes, I did some leadership speaking, leadership consulting, and that was pretty good. But then now, fortunately been able to transition into vacation rental management and found a new area, which I didn't even think I was capable of. And because of another veteran, so Casago, which is an international brand, was started by Steve Schwab. Steve Schwab is a veteran. Steve Schwab and I served together in the Rangers 30 years ago. So, when he decided to leave the military and he got educated and, he started in this big brand, he talked to my wife and I Ilona Melnichenko a couple years ago and said, hey, why don't you guys open up this ownership model, this franchise here? And I'm like, what? You know, because he recognized something in us both that we don't even recognize. And that's what I tell people. If you're in business all the time, if you're a business leader and you recognize something in a veteran, tell them. Tell them you recognize something in them. And I even go back to how I moved here. You know, my friend Tom Power owns a big minting company here, and the leaders in the minting industry. He says, hey, I need some help in my company and you can help me. And I'm like, what? You know, because he recognized something in me. And veterans, we're in the selfless service business. We don't want money and we don't need medals. And that's what makes us a different brand. And if you're in business and you need somebody to do something that's hard, find a veteran. If they need educated, send them to school. And guess what? You're going to get more than what you ask for.
And you hit on a lot of very great points that I discuss quite a bit, because I tell people all the time, you will never find more loyal, dedicated workers than veterans and military spouses. It's just their makeup. It's just who they are. It's just what they do. They just, you know, they want to succeed. They want to do well in where they're at. The drive and determination it takes to live the military life and then transition in the civilian world. You know, it's rough. That's why there's so many foundations out there, which I'm so grateful for, that like Blue Angels Foundation, preventing veteran suicide. Oh my gosh, means so much to me, because we need to be able to not only help people transition from the whole different world that the military is into the civilian world, but let them see their worth and their value of who they are and where they stand. And maybe it's not the path you originally thought it was going to be. Like you said, you kind of bounced around and did a few different things. So did my dad. And it was the talents work the way they work. Just because you're bouncing a little bit doesn't mean you can't do anything. Okay. Sometimes we got to dip our toes in a few waters before we find the pond to take the swim. Not a bad thing to test them out. And I think that's phenomenal. I do love the leadership that you got, the leadership skills you got from your time during the service and how to grow it. I find that a lot of veterans I meet just have that strong leadership sense to them, because it was ingrained in them the right way. So I love that aspect of it. Now, when you met your wife, were you still serving?
I was not. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was a post career. So it's great that she's now seeing a lot of these things, because now we're reliving some of these things that we did in the military together. We're going to go visit West Point together.
Oh, fun.
And she's never seen it. And it's good they understand that. You know, one thing the military does do very well is the military, like before you get promoted, they send you to a course. And when you're in one of these courses, you're like, oh my gosh, why do I need this course? And then afterwards you're like, wow, that was actually pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, the military does a great job, both non-commissioned officers and officers, of every time these young men and women get promoted, we're going to a school.
Yep.
And during that school, you're learning things. You know, sometimes the civilian community, civilian businesses, you know, they try to do it. They don't do it as well. Sometimes it's just OJT. But, you know, the military's structured plan for promotion is very good as far as that educational piece. So, you know, big kudos there. And I think that's what gave me a foundation of peace. The other part that you said that's very important is, when you're in the military and you're serving and, you know, you're not making a lot of money, but you're with the group that you feel like protects you.
Yeah.
You know, I can even remember, you know, and I had this little place and I was like, and just mentioned to one of my teammates, man, I gotta change the tile floor in the kitchen this weekend. And he's like, do you know how to do that? I'm like, no, not really. I'll figure it out. And at like 7 a.m., ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, you know, with coffee and his toolbox, he's like, come on, we're going to change that tile floor. I'm like, what? I didn't even ask him.
Yeah.
And those are things that military people do for each other. You know, there's the guy that knows how to work on a car. There's the guy that knows how to do woodworking.
Yep.
There's the guy, I remember, he's a sergeant major retired, another Ranger legend, Lee Schmid. He used to make like the going away plaques for we had guys going away. And, if one of the officers was leaving, we're like, Lee, we need it to be like this. And everybody would pitch in and it would come back with this like handcrafted, handcrafted skull with a beret on it in a glass case. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, how do you even do that?
Yeah.
So, there's so much talent in people. So that's the blessing of being military. Other thing is about being in the military is you cannot talk to somebody for 10 years. And as soon as you talk to them again, it's like you were just there yesterday.
Oh yeah.
The military doesn't be like, what didn't you call me? What didn't you call me? What didn't you call me? Yeah. It's just like you catch up in a matter of minutes. And so that's that brotherhood. Why? Because it's a brotherhood built in adversity.
Yeah.
Right? It's built, you want to say built on the front lines? Yes, it's built on the front line, like what your father experienced in Vietnam. It's built through sacrifice. It's built through, going on a deployment for a year and not seeing your family and things like that. People can't even contemplate that, or living in, a bee hut or a Connex or, hoping that you could take a shower once a week, things like that. And those are, but if you go back and you ask the veterans, they probably wouldn't change that experience for anything because it helped mold them. So.
It's very true. And it's funny, like what trickled down through me as the child of my father. My father was the most amazing father of two girls. Like, for being the badass guy that he was, he could go out, if there was a fight going on in the street, my father could walk out in the middle of the street, cross his arms and stare, and the people would break up and walk away without him having to step near him. That was the level of what my father exuded in power and strength. But then he had two little girls, and he was Mr. down on the floor playing with us, loving us. But I understood if he told me to jump, I jump, and then I ask how high. And believe me, if anybody tested those boundaries, that would be me. But it was a world that I appreciated and I grew up in, and I grew up being a very strong and independent woman because of that with me. Now, sometimes I may be a bit much for people, but it's been an area that I appreciated, that I took from watching him, how he handled what he did in the military, where he was at, how he grew. And we've had people in recent years, shortly before he died, we had some of the guys who served with him in supply come to town and get to see him. And exactly what you're saying, no time had passed. They were just same old group they had been before, just breezing through it, talking about it, living life and having a good time. Mm-hmm. And I loved the smiles on my parents' faces from getting to go back and touch on that, see where it is. Now, I have a goal to take my husband to see places we lived in, like Australia, like Guam, so he can understand. Now, it's weird because bases have closed, so parts of my life are shut down. Like Exmouth is a resort town now in Australia. But, I still want him to see and experience that, because then you'll better understand who I am. Because it was the four of us. My whole life, mom, dad, Amy, and me. But in Australia, for Thanksgiving and Christmas, it was at our house. We made the ham or the turkey. Everybody else brought a side dish. We had 22 single people in our house. It was a whole big deal. When he got out of the military, or we moved stateside, my sister and I are like, well, why isn't everybody coming over? We're the party place. But you do. It's family there. It's just a unity that you can't describe that you get from that service. So I appreciate that. What made you decide it was time to transition out of service?
Well, I got to, I was a sergeant major, got to the end of my career. And I think, 26 years was, a nice career. I had a lot of experiences. I think back, like, would I have done some things differently? Probably. But, you can't look back and dwell on that. But you have to say that, I'm proud of my career. I did a lot. I went to a lot of schools, the HOOAH schools, as they say. That's spelled HOOAH, by the way, HOOAH. And I was fortunate enough to do that. My wife and I, our daughter just did skydiving last week out in Jean. Yeah, first time her and her friends went out, 4 of them. She's 18, and one of the instructors and I were like talking a bit, and these guys have like 20,000 jumps. You know, I have like a few hundred. But it was funny. He was like, "How many jumps you have?" And I'm like, "Only one that matters because I jumped into combat, right?" So I'm like, "Only one that matters." He was like, "Oh, okay, easy." Combat jump. So, but it was fun to see her out there doing that. I just think that, the experiences of the military, and it's the same with, that's why I think I bonded with athletes so much, so well. I bonded with athletes because I understand them. I understand like what the work it takes to get there. Like every single day they're worried, like if they're in a lineup, they're going to get cut. That's how it is when you're in the Rangers. Yeah. You're in any special operations unit. You're like, okay, did I do enough today not to get cut? Doesn't matter who you are. Right. Even when you make sergeant, staff sergeant, sergeant first class, first sergeant, sergeant major, doesn't matter. Like you can get cut. Yeah. Like, so every single day, you got to show up and put out. Yep. And that's a difficult world to live in, but it's a great world to live in, because you are at the tip of the spear. And so that's why I think like understanding the transitions of professional athletes and professional veterans, whether in the military 4 years or 40, that transition piece is very important. And I don't know if I started a plan early enough. I probably did. Last couple of years, I'm like, okay, I need to do something. I'll do this leadership thing. But I think that when young men and women who are leaving service, think about it sooner than later, and you almost have to play that card close to your vest too, because you don't want like your leadership team to quite know, because they'll be like, you're not focused on being in the Rangers. What do you mean you want to be a chef when you get out? What the hell? Right. And I saw that same type of judgment in professional athletics too. Yeah. So those guys had to like play close to their vest too. Yeah. Because then the GM comes and hears it and he's like, oh, that kid's not focused on playing. And I'm like, what? Yes, he is. He's like, he's here every day working his butt off. But so anyway, on that part.
No, it's a very true thing. Now there are wonderful resources out there for those transitions, where there are workshops and little things you can research online that just kind of help you create your plan, your next steps, where you're going to go, kind of give you an idea of how to lay it out. Everybody's plan is going to be different. Everybody's, because it depends on your mindset. It depends on how you lay out and where you go and where you work. And we talk about stuff like Skill Bridge and everything is great. Still needs to grow, still needs to be built and work where it needs to go. But having an idea of where you're at, doing a timeline, starting the process to get yourself into it actually helps alleviate some of the stress of it. And it will help it so you don't lose your focus of where you're at or where you're going. Because it's true. It's like anybody else. People give their notice at a regular job. Oh, you've got short timers. Oh, you're not even focused on what you're doing. Oh, kind of thing. Human beings are human beings at the end of the day. And so having those avenues to be able to help guide you and set you up are huge. I was actually just in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and my husband has some friends there. So I was there for business. He came and joined me, and we were hanging out with the friends, and we went to the Nuclear, Scientific, and Historic Atomic Museum. I think that was the name. And as we're walking through the museum, they're talking about different areas, and they had a plaque on the wall, and it was the state of Nevada. And it had all these stickers on it. And I recognized one sticker, and I sent a picture of it to my mom, and I said, I swear Daddy has this sticker on his briefcase, because during his time in the Navy here in Vegas, he was actually sent out and he worked at the nuclear test site. And my mom sent me a picture of his briefcase, and all but the United States Navy sticker were on that plaque. And it was a cool moment for me to see, like, that was some of my father's work up there being respected and appreciated for what it did. Because I feel like when he got out of the military, people didn't tend to give the respect they give in the military, and he had earned the respect he got in the military. He had done what he had, and then you get out and everybody's like, oh, finding reasons or whatever. So it's so interesting to hear you say that, you were kind of putting a plan together. You weren't sure where you were going to go, but you were kind of figuring it out. Because I think a lot of people just go, that's it, I'm out. And then they're like, crap, what the hell am I doing now?
You need to start it, though, on day one, actually. And that's what I didn't do well. I'll give an example. My friend, Colonel Andy Ulrich, he lives in Colorado. He's a Ranger Colonel, one of the best combat military officers ever, West Point graduate. I don't know if he knew how long his career was going to be, and he did, 25 plus years, but he knew when he retired, he wasn't going to work again. Like he didn't want to.
Okay.
So, he purposefully lived off of his second lieutenant pay his entire career, and the rest of it he invested.
Okay.
And it was funny because even, when, you're a captain, you're making some money, and the other officers have been like, you still drive that old beat up truck, Ulrich? And he's like, yes, I do. Right. As they're driving, their new cars or whatever.
Their
And
Trans Ams.
He's like, yes, I do. And now he's retired at 50, and, he skydives, he does CrossFit, and he scuba dives, and he hunts and travels the world. And
That's
good for
awesome.
him.
Yeah.
And I think that, he said, that's going to be my goal. I'm going to retire at 50 and I'm not going to work again. And he started that early. And I always tell military people, to do that, do whatever you need to do, start it sooner than later. And whether it's, $100 or $200 you're saving or something like that. And, you can find ways. And now it's so much easier today to invest and do stocks than there was no internet, right?
Right.
And you had to call the Schwab guy, right? The TD Bank guy or whoever. You had to call some person, and it was so complicated to understand. And I didn't really start to understand it till I was cadre at West Point, and then actually a couple of cadets taught me.
Oh, there you go.
They're reading this Morningstar report. And I'm like, what is that? And they're like, oh, it's how to do stocks. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
But I was already a sergeant first class, E7 by then. But still, I learned it, but they were teaching them that early on. So I think there's ways, there's simple ways for them to do it.
No, it's very true. And what's funny is it doesn't matter in the aspect of life. I've not been great with saving and finances. And when my husband and I got together, he said, we need to diversify our financial portfolio. And I said, okay, great. What is that and how do we do it? Because I was all proud. I had got a 401k 3 years before that. And it was just because I bounced. I lived life in the moment and did whatever, kind of thing. And so when I got older, I finally realized, hey, maybe I need to have my path. But when you have that steady opportunity with the military where you know what you're making, you know how you can, put some here, put some there. We talk to people all the time about baby steps in the financial world. Okay, so maybe you can't put $200 here, but you can put 25 a paycheck here, and just have it and get that build up. It always starts small, but it can build you really strong. Obviously, by your friend, he did rather well if he's able to retire and not have to work anymore.
Yeah,
he
did a great job. And that's something that, I want young soldiers to hear.
Yeah.
And it's even not just for the officers, it's in non-commissioned officers too. You get a bonus or you get something and you're like, hey, let me buy something new. Well, do I really need a new microwave? No, my old one's fine or whatever. It's things like that. And I think that's the importance. And then just learning, learning financial guys. And actually, later on in life, then my oldest daughter who worked for a financial firm, she's like, hey, there's a guy in our financial firm who his name's David Alderson. And he's like, he's just a really good guy. And he's known throughout the firm of making average people millionaires. And I'm like, great. And we met him, and here's a guy that same thing, didn't come from money,
right.
Had a basketball scholarship that helped him pay for college. And now, he's one of the best financial guys that I know. And you feel, you feel confident in giving him your money, and even started our now 18-year-old daughter with him and get her started early. And those are things that you can find, and you just have to do your research. And today, research is everywhere. Yep. It wasn't like the old days. You had to call the phone and you had to meet the guy and you didn't understand. And, people were getting caught up in rackets. So just got to be smart today. But fortunately, I and I do think that the veteran today that's coming in now, they are a lot smarter on that. But I also don't want them to lose their aspect of why they're serving either. That's the other thing. Like my generation served because you wanted to serve your country.
Yep.
Right. And you felt like you wanted to give back. You know, my father was a World War II veteran. So you know why they served. Right. They you know, they served for freedom of the world.
Right.
That's why they served.
Yep.
And so and then that, you know, that post-World War II generation, like, built America. Like, you want to talk about the Industrial Revolution. That was it, you know, post-World War II. And so, you know, I did it because I wanted to pay for college and I wanted to serve my country. And, you know, I thought I'd be in just 4 years and that's it. And, you know, works out for you.
Well, there's a lot of people, there's a few guys that we were at my father's memorial service and one gentleman stood up and he said he was working the gate on the base and he said he just kind of got thrown anywhere. And so he figured he'd just do his 4 years and be done. And my father saw him, met him, talked to him. And my father was the type of person, if he liked you, he was going to help you. And so he said to the guy, okay, study this. You're going to come work with me in supply. And he's like, you're not going to get me transferred off the gate. They won't. A week later, I think he said, he took the test and he was working in supply with my father shortly after that. And he said because of that, he went from a 4-year Navy career to a 20-year Navy career. And it was just because there was somebody there to guide or mentor or lead to it. And there are quite a few people I know that step into the service just thinking, I'll just do a few years, get my feet on the ground. And then all of a sudden they're going, hey, but I like this world. This is my world. I like what I'm doing. I like what I stand for, you know, and I think that's awesome.
I think that's awesome too. And I also think you brought up another point. Like, I think that these military recruiters, you are so significant in these young men and women in their first tour. And really there are some initial tours that aren't built for everybody. Yeah. And I know there's a quota system and you got to put people in and everything else, but and I know, you know, and I wasn't a recruiter and I'm glad I wasn't, and I know that they're under tough regulations. Yeah. Because it's not just, you know, putting somebody in the service, it's putting somebody from this category or that category. They have a lot of quotas they have to fill. And you got to fill, you know, the supply before the Rangers or the Rangers before the tanks or the tanks before the, you know, so on and so forth. But I think, you know, you really have to do a deep dive of that young man or woman and see, is this first tour, how's this first tour going to be for this young person? Right. Some people can handle it. Some people can't.
Oh yeah. Right. And it's okay. If you cannot, it is okay. All right. There are so many paths and avenues that you can take in it. So now talking about when you brought up the financial guide, that because we were talking about businesses started and owned by veterans as part of when you work with as we're because there is a financial group. I think it's First American Financial was started by a veteran.
Great.
And pretty much most all his financial advisors are veterans themselves in some way. And I love that, how it continues to grow. Now, when you guys got involved in Casago.
You got it. Casago, Las Vegas.
Ha, I said it right the first time. Go me. When you guys got involved in that, so it was a friend of yours who was a veteran who said, hey, you should step in to do this, right?
He started Casago. Steve Schwab. He started Casago 25 years ago. He's the CEO of Casago International. Okay.
And for those who do not know, what is Casago?
So Casago's vacation rental property management company.
Okay.
So it's all over the U.S. and Mexico, other parts of the world, international brand, and basically locally owned and operated branches that manage properties. Okay. Focus on vacation rentals, short-term vacation rentals specifically, in which we do here. So we have homes in Henderson, homes in Vegas with permanent properties, and condos at the MGM. So which are permitted properties for vacation rentals. So somebody buys them and says, hey, I want to make some money off my investment. How do I do it? They come to us and we manage it for them from soup to nuts. So so Steve saw us and said, and you know, I think there were people in this business already that had come to him and been like, hey, I want to buy this franchise, get it in. And he didn't let it out because he reviews those potential owners very stringently because there is a Casago standard.
Yes.
There's you can get into this world, and we call it the Airbnb pirate ship, where people just like, I'm going to buy a place, I'm going to Airbnb it till I get caught. Yeah. Right. And I'm going to put 25 people in it, and I don't really care. And, and then those people are idiots, by the way. I can't take them.
Tell us how you really feel, JP.
I can't take them. And then some people openly gloat about that. But you're ruining the business for people, for professional property managers that do it correctly. Now, my wife's the realtor and property manager. I take care of all the guest experience. So I'm like the wizard behind the computer curtain. And our homeowners see how we manage, and we're the stewards of their property.
Yeah.
And Casago likes to say we're the stigward, the old English word, which is, when the king and queen went away, the stigward took care of the property. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So, you don't have to live here. You can live wherever you live, and you know that your investment property is being taken care of. Oh, by the way, it's making you some money, and we're putting the right people in there, and we have the power and resource to do it. That's what we have. Casago has this power and resource. And oh, by the way, before you even get your franchise, you have to go to what they call Casago University, a week-long training in Rocky Point, Mexico, and then after you pass, if you pass. Right? Then you get awarded your franchise. And so we did. We scored really well. Actually, I think I scored on my final test about a 94, and I think Alona was actually like a 96.
Okay.
So she beat me.
Was she a realtor prior to this?
She was a realtor just prior to that, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, we had started thinking about this, and so one of us had to be a realtor property manager. She raised her hand and said, I'll do it. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, English is her second language. She's from Ukraine originally. Though she's been in America, she's a U.S. citizen, been in America 25 years. And in the state of Nevada, that real estate test and that property manager test is not easy. It's not easy. It's not easy if you speak and understand English as your first thing. They try to trick questions. And, she crushed it and got it. And, we're moving on from there. So, so started with 0 properties. Now we have 13 and moving and shaking.
I love it because Vegas is a town with the vacation home market's a great thing. There's a lot of timeshare stuff around here. My husband has been a broker in real estate for over 20 years.
Sure.
He's at 22 or 23 in Vegas. And he does that stuff too. And you see the different levels of what's coming out. So to have it where it is actually this level, a caliber of what they do and how they go into it for the franchise to even be set up. So smells military. And I absolutely adore that aspect of it because it can go crazy and haywire and everybody can think they have but there's entrepreneurialism and then there's just what the heck. Let me throw this and see if it's going to stick on the wall kind of thing to it, and you want to have that build to it to do it as well.
I don't think we would have ever done something like this if it wasn't for somebody like Steve, because, we work well in a regimented system. My wife, former world champion, former figure skating coach and choreographer coach, when she plans a skating program for an elite athlete, like it's all sequenced every second, step, turn, step, right? So we're both regimented people when we work like that.
Yeah.
And what I like what Steve does is he's still he still has his finger on the pulse of the business. And I think if you are a business person and you are an entrepreneur and you're running a business, you have to keep your finger on the pulse to understand the things that are happening. And he's approachable too, right? Not just, running all these, 12,000 or so properties. I think Casago has under their flag now, getting ready to get a bunch more here. He's still actionable and available. And he's learned that from his military experience.
Yep.
Because the best leaders are always available. The best leaders are in the fight. The best leaders see what's happened. You can't manage from afar always. You have to go to that location. And that's the genius behind Casago is we cannot manage in Utah. We cannot manage in Reno. We manage Vegas, Henderson. That's it.
Yep.
So live where you work. You see it. You see the properties. You understand things happen. That's the genius behind it.
No, I think it's true. It's very, very true. And I love it because of the lead to it. I thank him for his service. You can pass that to him and all of your friends. I'd love to have every one of them on our show at some point on it. But what I love is we talked about, because he did write a book about leadership. And that is one of the biggest things I have found that a lot of veterans that I deal with walked away from the military is maybe they didn't start out a leader, but by God, by the time they got out, they were.
Sure.
And I think that's phenomenal to have, because you need to have that selfless leadership in the world. So I think that's great. We are running out of time, JP, so you're going to have to come back and see me again. Sorry.
Well, it was great. So you know what? So maybe I'll just leave you with a few words.
Go for it.
From Julius Caesar. So if a man were to know the end of this day's business ere it comes, and suffice to say, this day will end, and the end be known. And when we meet again, we shall smile. And if we don't, well, then this parting was well made.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. I appreciate you greatly, JB, and definitely will absolutely have you back on here. All right, guys, we're at that time again. All right. I need you to like, follow, share. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. We're on Spotify. We keep letting you know we have our website coming where there are going to be links to all these resources. Guess what there'll be a link to on there? Telling you. Come with me, my friends. We are going to find those resources for you and your family. Have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time.
Faded photographs cover